Hello everyone, welcome to Study Room. I'm Kanika and I'm your educator for the chapters in English. In this video, we are going to be learning about the chapter in English of Glimpses of India, a baker from Goa. So let's get started. Before we dive into the chapter, let's look a little into about the author. The author of this chapter is Lucio Rodriguez, who was a famous Goan author and has written several English and Konkani folk tales. The theme of the story that we are going to study about is such that in this story, the author presents a very pen portrait and a realistic as well as a fictional version of a traditional Goan baker. The story explores and dives into the Portuguese influences on Goan tradition, culture, and eating habits that are still carried forward till date. In the image below, you can have a glimpse of the architectural prevalence in the buildings and organization of the city life in Goa that takes its influence back to the Portuguese settlement. Let's look into the explanation that we have for the chapter A Baker from Goa. Our elders are often heard reminiscing nostalgically about those good old Portuguese days, the Portuguese and their famous loaves of bread. Those eaters of loaves might have vanished, but the makers are still there. It means that the elderly, who are now old, fondly remember about the days when the Portuguese were still there. The Portuguese were very famous for their loaves of bread. The eaters of those loaves, that is, the Portuguese, might have left Goa, but the makers of those bread continues to exist, which means that even though the Portuguese who bought the culture of bread eating have gone, but there are still people till date who make and eat it. Amongst us, the mixers, the molders, and those who bake the loaves. Those age old time tested furnaces still exist. Furnaces are structures within buildings that are like ovens. They ensure that the bread that is prepared is not just eatable, but also extremely soft and well made. The fire in the furnaces has not yet been extinguished, which is a form of a representation of the food culture that was brought by the Portuguese. The Portuguese here represent a certain form of cultural habit which, despite them leaving the Goan region, still exist. The thud and jingle of the traditional baker's bamboo heralding his arrival in the morning can still be heard in some places. Maybe the father is not alive, but the son still carries on the family profession. These bakers are even today known as trader in Goa. So the time of the arrival of the traditional baker and the way he carried his loaves of bread on a stick of bamboo and a carrier came with a lot of happening and noise around in the morning. Even though in certain families and communities, the father, who must have been the originator of the bread making creativity and art, might have died, but his son, who is now alive, continues to carry forth the profession and the business of bread. During our childhood in Goa, the baker used to be our friend, companion, and guide, which signifies a very close relationship between the people who made loaves of bread and the community. He used to come at least twice a day. Once, when he set out in the morning on his selling round, selling loaves of bread to as many people as possible, and then again when he returned after emptying his huge basket. The jingling thud, the happening noise, which signified the arrival of the bread seller and of his bamboo, woke everyone up from their sleep, and we ran to meet and greet him, which again tells us how close the people were to their bread makers and sellers. Why was it so? Was it for the love of the loaf? No, not at all. The loaves were bought by some pasquin or bastine, the maidservant of the house. What the children eagerly longed for were those bread bangles, which we chose carefully. Sometimes it was a sweet bread of special make. What we longed for were those bread bangles, which we chose very carefully. Sometimes it was sweet bread of special make. This signifies that the children in the olden times were extremely fond of bread bangles, which were sometimes sweet in nature. The baker made his musical entry on the scene with the jang jang sound of his special made bamboo staff. One hand supported the basket on his head and the other banged the bamboo on the ground, which meant a very happening and a very happy arrival of the bread maker in the community living. He would greet the lady of the house with a very happy good morning and then place his basket on the vertical bamboo. We kids would often be pushed aside with a mild rebuke and the loaves would be delivered to the servant. But we would not give up. This explains that the very activity of the baker coming to the community and the children being extremely enthusiastic about seeing the bread maker and whatever it is that he sold was extremely looked forward with a lot of eagerness. We would climb a bench or the parapet and peep into the basket somehow. I can still recall the typical fragrance of those loaves. Loaves for the elders and the bangles for the children. In the next image and illustration, you can see how soft and spongy the loaf of bread is. Then the children did not even care to brush their teeth or wash their mouths properly after eating those loaves of bread. And why should they, in fact? Who would take the trouble of plucking the mango leaf for the toothbrush for brushing the teeth? And why was it necessary at all? In fact, they pointed that the tiger never brushed his teeth. But tea could wash and clean up everything so nicely after all. So instead of brushing their teeth, everyone always looked forward and preferred to have a hot cup of tea. There are certain key terms that are of extreme importance and significance in this chapter. So, in order to completely understand and comprehend the chapter, let's also try to understand what these key terms are. Reminiscing nostalgically, it means thinking fondly of the past or thinking of a certain memory very nicely as well as happily. Heralding is a form of an announcement. Rebuke is an expression of disapproval or a scolding. Fragrance is a scent or a smell. Now let's discuss a few questions. What are the elders in Goa nostalgic about? Is bread making still popular in Goa? How do you know? What is the baker called? When would the baker come every day? Why did children run to meet him? Let's take a moment and think about it and discuss them. The first question, what are the elders in Goa nostalgic about? The elders in Goa are nostalgic about the good old Portuguese days and their love of bread and loaves. The writer says that the eaters of loaves have left, but the makers of these bread loaves continue to exist. Question number 2, is bread making still popular in Goa? How do you know? The answer could be yes, bread making is still popular in Goa. This is very clear from the narrator's statement that the eaters have gone away, leaving the makers behind. There are mixers, molders, and the ones who bake the loaves. The time-tested furnaces still exist there. Question number 3. What is the baker called? The baker is called a padder in Goa. When would the baker come every day? Why did the children run to meet him? The baker would come twice a day, once early in the morning and the second time when he returned after selling his stuff. The children would run to meet him as they wanted to have bread bangles, which were sweet in nature. Moving on, let's look into the further explanation of the chapter, A Baker from Goa. Marriage gifts are meaningless without the sweet bread known as the bowl. Just as a party for a feast loses its charm without bread, not enough can be said to show how important a baker can be for a village. The lady of the house must prepare sandwiches on the occasion of her daughter's engagement. Cakes and bolognese are a must for Christmas as well as other festivals. Thus, the presence of the baker's furnace in the village is absolutely essential. for it is the place where the bread is made and cooked properly. The baker or bread seller of those days had a very peculiar as well as a very interesting dress known as the kabai. It was a single piece of long frock which reached all the way down to the knees of the person wearing them. In our childhood, we saw bakers wearing a shirt and trousers which were short than full length ones and longer than half pants. Even today, anyone who wears a half pant which reaches just below the knees invites the comment that he is dressed like a padder. The baker usually collected his bills at the end of the month. Monthly accounts used to be recorded on some wall in pencil. Baking was indeed a very profitable and well to do profession in the old days. The baker and his family never starved, for they were always provided by the profession, which always bought them enough money and resources. He, his family, and his servants always looked happy, prosperous, and well to do. Their plump physique and healthy bodies was an open testimony to this. Even today, any person with a jackfruit like physical appearance is easily compared to a baker. There are certain key terms so far that we also need to remember. Let's look into what they are. Plump physique refers to pleasantly fat body, which you can see from the image of the cartoon here. Open testimony refers to public statement about a character, quality, or a certain feature. Let's discuss a few questions here. What did the bakers wear? Number 1, in the Portuguese days. Number 2, when the author was young. Question number 2, who invites the comment, he is dressed like a padder? Why? Now question number 3, where were the monthly accounts of the baker recorded? And question number 4, what does jackfruit-like appearance mean? Let's take a moment and think about it and discuss. The first question, what did the bakers wear? Number 1, in the Portuguese days, the answer is that the bakers were usually dressed up in a peculiar dress called kabai. It was a single piece long frock reaching down to the knees. Question number 2 of when the author was young, what did the bakers wear? So during his childhood days, the author saw the bakers wearing a shirt and trousers which were shorter than full length ones and longer than half pants. Question number 2, who invites the comment, he is dressed like a padder, why? The answer is that any person who is wearing a half pant which reaches just below the knees invites this comment. This is because the baker, known as a padder, used to dress like this in this peculiar manner. Question number 4. Where were the monthly accounts of the baker recorded? Monthly accounts of the baker were recorded on some wall in the house with a pencil. The next question, what does a jackfruit-like appearance mean? It means having a plump physique like a jackfruit. Now let's look into some more questions that are extremely important to this chapter. Is bread an important part of Goan life, and how do you know this? Yes, bread is an important part of Goan life. It is needed for marriage gifts, parties, feasts, and certain festivities and celebrations. Bread is also needed by a mother for preparing sandwiches during her daughter's engagement. Therefore, it is necessary to have breads for every occasion, because of which the presence of a baker's furnace in the village is extremely important and essential. Now let's go through a quick revision. The quick revision points are extremely important for you to understand and remember whatever you have learned and understood so far in the chapter. The author remembers the village baker known as the padder from his childhood. The padder is an essential part of various life experiences from engagements to weddings as well as holidays like Christmas. The story is a glimpse of one of the many traditions that lives on to this day.